I'm recording today without a things with the sponge.
Pop screen?
Pop screen, because I let my friend Mike use the studio earlier this week, and I'm like, all right, here's the stuff. The thing's recording, talk into there. When you're done, take the windscreen with you, and I never want to see it again, unless you come back to record, in which case bring it with you. But the other windscreens are like 2 floors up,
right.
And I'm like, I don't want to go do it.
Yeah, they're also unreasonably expensive.
I think these were only like $12 off of Amazon. Well, I mean, for what they are.
$12 for one windscreen? I'm like, this costs less than a cent to make. Come on.
But it's made for this microphone.
Yeah. Cue the music!
Cue the music!
Cue the music!
Ah,
Coming to you live from the great indoors of New York City, I'm Bryan Teoh. Joining me today from Green Bay, Wisconsin is Kevin Macleod. Together, we'd like to welcome you to Composerish, where we discuss issues facing modern working composers. Sometimes.
But today, absolutely. Today we are absolutely.
Yeah, so I write music for games occasionally, but not nearly as often as I end up writing them for video. I'll do film scores way more often, obviously. And one of the peculiarities that I found is I submitted some music to a game developer, and they had told me that there were gaps in the perfect loops that I made. I was like, there absolutely are not. I take offense to that because I've trimmed these to be perfectly looping.
Yes. And you drag it into iTunes and it perfectly loops, right?
And I can take that track and I can drop it into my DAW and it perfectly loops and everything is all hunky-dory. But he's like, there are gaps. Trust me. I was like, okay, well, I don't want to say that you're wrong, so let me see if I can figure it out. So I was talking to some other people who actually write music for games a lot more often. They're like, oh yeah, that's a thing. That MP3s will tack on silence to the end of their audio files.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's because they hide their ID3 information and super or subsonic information in that silence. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
That is interesting. It's wrong, but it's interesting.
wait, what do you mean?
I mean, it would be cool, you could do that. They kind of hide color information in the U.S. color television standard, just in between the bits of the other information. The interesting part about the MP3 thing is if you played an MP3 and then somebody else recorded it, you will never be able to recover that information, which would be there if it was subsonic or whatever.
Yeah. I was wondering maybe I shouldn't add extra ID3 information then, because sometimes I'll add a lot, sometimes I'll add a little, sometimes they don't have any at all. And I was like, is this extending the amount of time that I'm adding?
Yep. No, add all the artwork you want, add lyrics. It doesn't matter. Those are all contained in the headers of the thing.
Interesting.
Like if you open up an MP3 file in a text editor, you will be able maybe to find, I don't know if they compress, if you type in, I don't know, let's say in Compotech.com, you might be able to find that string in the actual file. The problem that you're coming across is an MP3 problem.
Explain.
Oh, boys. If you export a WAV file, the headers of the WAV file will say, this song is X number of samples long, and it's this bit rate, it's this many channels, here's the data, and then just fire hose of uncomprehensibleness comes after that. And it can end at any time, which is the deal. It's like, this will be exactly 2 minutes and 3/1000ths of a second long.
Sure. Because it's just telling you moment by moment, fraction of a second by fraction of a second.
And then there's the end of the data. When you come across the last bit, that's all there is to be. And in an MP3, it's done by chunks.
Yeah. I think they call that windowing, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I ain't never windowed. I've dealt with a little bit of MP3 encoder decoders back in the day, and I did recently a little bit the JavaScript one. No, okay, anyway, none of this matters. MP3s can, at the end and at the beginning, choose to insert little bits of microsilence just to get the frames even so that it compresses nicer.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of like quantization. If you were trying to make a square in, let's say, Photoshop, and you had it snapping to pixels or to 10 pixel chunks, if you overshoot it a little bit, it's going to snap it over one end.
To the next 10 pixels. Right. The resolution of the length of an MP3 file is different and fixable. Which is the horrible
That's the most
part
important
of this whole
part.
thing.
Because I was like, well, at first I was thinking the first time I ever worked on a game at all, I delivered WAV files or AIF files because that's the standard when you're working on video. You want to give them the highest quality possible file format, which is uncompressed. And they're like, we can't use this. There's going to be a gigabyte of information that's just
Right.
music, which is ridiculous for this little like casual iPhone game or whatever.
And you don't want to trust them into compressing it themselves. It's like, no, I have the tools. I will compress it for you.
How do you go about fixing this then? Because you need to deliver compressed audio and you can't have those gaps.
There is a way to fix this. If you're a software writer, it can be fixed. You can detect, well, no, actually you can't detect zeros because there's going to be some compression artifacting in there.
Right, there's also going to be like silence in the music too, occasionally.
Right, and you don't want that to trigger your problem. But you can tell it, like, you can give it metadata as to, like, what micro frame to start at and what micro frame to end at. I believe that's how Apple does it. That's why when you drag it into iTunes, it works fine. But if you drag it into another MP3 decoder environment, may not work okay.
Yeah.
It may have to round that out. So one option is to provide the WAV file. That gives you the exact duration. It's dead simple. They don't have to correct for it. If they need the compressed version from you and they can't fix their library, man, I don't know.
Well, I thought you said there was a fix for this, and now you're like, nah.
There is a yes.
You're like, the fix is screw you. There is no fix.
Some software compensates for it. Most software does not.
Yeah.
So if you're a developer and you're like, why would this ever matter? Well, occasionally it really does matter.
Right.
What microframe you end on.
In this specific situation.
Yeah. So no, there's no I'm sorry. I just lied. No, there's no universal fix for this.
You keep playing with my emotions here. Because you're like, no, I'm kidding. There is a fix. There isn't one. No, I'm kidding. There is a fix. There isn't one.
All right, deliver WAV files and then feign ignorance and let them figure it out. Like, if they can't.
Video game music is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And
absolutely.
I have to believe that there's a standard fix for this. Somebody was telling me to use OGG format, .ogg.
OGG?
Yeah, I tried that.
I don't know enough about that.
It still ended up adding silence to the tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no problem with it, but apparently the developers, when I gave it to them, they were like, yeah, it's still got gaps in it, man.
Yeah, I guess who's right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not going to be like, you're wrong,
Yeah.
check it again. Like, I'd like to speak to your manager, please.
What you need to do is get the tools that they're using and drag it in there.
That's probably the best way to do it.
Oh, what you need to do is turn on gapless playback in Fmod. Or I don't know what they're using for their audio engine.
In this case, it probably was. I actually don't know. I was going to say it's probably Fmod. Oh, it was, because I remember asking them. They said their sound designer was preferred working in Fmod, so that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, it's free. Download it. Drag it in there. It's going to take you about 2 hours to go through the tutorials to just understand how the thing works.
Yeah.
But now you'll understand how the thing works.
That's been a long time coming anyway. Fmod and WYs are both always been on the back burner of like, I need to dive more into these. I've kind of taken just a basic precursory look, but like it's something I should know. I don't work on game music that often.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't want to. Game developers out there, hit me up. Bryan Teoh at sleepfacingwest@gmail.com.
Hey, also game developers, I actually know a little bit about Fmod. I went through the tutorial for 2 hours, so hit me up.
No. I'm going to edit this episode and I'm going to chop out that plank. No, I'm just kidding.
God damn it.
Or maybe put like evil music behind you so it'll make it seem like less of a savory option here. I've got all the power. Yeah, there have to be common solutions because there's a lot of people that are writing video game music.
Yeah.
Is that a proper term or you said
I
game
think
music?
I think it's WAV file.
Is it WAV file? I mean, there's a lot of people who barely even know anything about music making game music, and they're just like, they're selling stuff to iPhone developers and whatever. So there have to be common fixes. And if it's not known on the musician's side, it has to be known on the developer side. So I'd be interested in finding out what that is.
I think we still have to call it video game music because there is still a fairly large tabletop game music world.
That is a whole thing. I didn't even know about this. Somebody asked me to make music one time for their tabletop game, and it took me a while. I had to have them explain it to me. I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, we want you to write music. It'll be a thing that you play in the background, so it'll kind of get our players into that world. And when I first heard about it, I thought it was the dumbest thing because I was like, dude, I know that you think that's going to be cool, but like that's just going to be really lame. People don't want to have these extra accoutrements. But I'm also thinking about like playing Sorry or like Shoots and Ladders. Like this is a whole other thing though. So
there's
it turns
vengeance
out It turns out I had to eat my words. I had to eat my because it is a whole thing and it is effective.
Yeah, it really is. And old. I think I first learned about this in, I'm going to say 1994.
So what, they'd send you like a tape cassette?
I used to. All right. Well, again, not that old, but yes, kind of old.
94, that was
94?
the transition.
Was it 94?
CDs were being sold.
CDs were coming
and
out.
They were
right.
becoming more popular, but you would still find in like Walmart, you would still find the format in both CD and tape cassette format.
And
in
tape.
94.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, this was all because I used to have a comic and game store in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And there was a product that came out. I forget the distributor. Doesn't really matter. But it was CDs for role-playing. And one of them was called, I believe, The Hunters Hunted for playing Vampire the Masquerade.
And was this like old school MIDI files?
No. This was legit orchestrated shit.
Really?
Yeah, there were only 2.
Was it clipped from a movie, or did they actually like hire an orchestra to like record this music?
They hired an
for a
orchestra
game?
to record this to be marketed toward gamers.
That's dedication.
Maybe it wasn't 94. Maybe it was 98. Ace of Base was out. I'm going to say 96.
All right, that's probably fair.
Saw the sign.
We don't have rights to that.
Is that my cultural touchstone?
Ace of Base. Yeah, but I think that oftentimes we end up being behind like cutting edge trends. So maybe by the time you heard of Ace of Base, it might have been a little bit late.
Yeah, it wasn't Manitowoc after all.
Or I guess things move a lot faster nowadays, so maybe not.
So anyway, the whole mood music thing is I was invited on a D&D podcast. Because there are a ton of D&D podcasts, and this was a 24-hour marathon.
They just play D&D and they record it, or what?
They play D&D and record it, and everyone's got their favorite DMs and their favorite NPCs and their favorite characters, and everyone goes off and does their thing, right? Their favorite players. Sometimes players play different characters. It's a thing. Role-playing games. If you haven't heard of them, I don't know where you've been. But they've used my music for years, and so they invited me on this special charity event thing. And we were all playing high-level characters, high-level, like 20th level D&D-esque characters. And the last time I honestly played D&D, it was 2nd edition. That was like, I don't know, they're on 5th now.
Honestly, I've never played it. It's one of those things that like I consider myself a nerdy guy, but then when it comes to like all of the nerdy cultural commonalities like D&D or playing like old school video games and stuff, I'm like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very strict household. We didn't have any of that.
Yeah, I know. You had to sneak your energy drinks. Still my favorite story.
Right. Some kids smuggle in cigarettes and booze. I had to sneak in Surge Cola and a Nirvana CD, which is heresy.
Fucking rebel. No, and you're trying to like get gigs on this podcast. Nobody's gonna hire you with that kind of checkered past, my friend. No one.
It's going on your permanent record.
Yeah, I grew up with the Dungeons and Dragons, and then Basic and Advanced, and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which became known as a 1st edition, and then 2nd edition, and then it all went to from there. Anyway, gaming music as ambiance is wonderful and underutilized, and I knew back then like this is the future. Turns out it didn't sell. And this is in the days before you could copy CDs, really. You could still copy a CD, but
would people just use their own music, like they'd find their favorite soundtrack CD or something from a movie, or they just didn't use it?
No, they just didn't use it because you needed to be in a place that had speakers.
Oh, right, because this is pre-phone days. So
this is pre-phones. There's no iPads. There's no Bluetooth speakers. There's nothing.
Yeah, it's not portable unless you bring a boombox with you.
Right. If you're doing like a thing where you like rotate to people's houses, you can get to the house that has, they've got speakers in their living room and we can listen to stuff while they play.
Yeah, until it gets too late and they ask you to move everything down to the basement, and then the music just ends. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, and then you gotta deal with your own ambiance of the water heater.
I was gonna say that sounds like it should be suggestive, but I don't think that you were meaning anything.
I take whatever suggestion you'd like.
The own ambiance of your internal struggle.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that didn't take off. I think it required mobile technology to really take off.
I think you're right. And
now it's a thing.
Right. And like the websites now are free and optimized for iPads and iPhones, and you just stream it to whatever. Like, we're starting to live in the future, definitely starting to produce for the future. At least I am. Hopefully. We'll see.
I still want to find out what the deal is with the looping of music in games. So I'm going to put out another call. If there's any person who is a game composer or perhaps a sound engineer or FX artist or somebody who works in games who actually knows this answer, you should give us a call at composerish@gmail.com.
Usually the best way to do it is to state something that is wrong unequivocally, and then people will correct you. So I'm going to say the reason why MP3s don't loop is because they do some sort of framing thing, and not every software package catches that shit on import, and maybe they can't. So
and I'm going to say what you need to do is calculate how many frames there are and how many seconds, and you have to write your piece of music to be exactly that length. That's why every single piece of game music is going to be multiples of the same number, because they loop at exactly the end of the frame. Prove me wrong, Internet.
Cue the outro!
Cue the outro!
Cue the outro!
I'd like to thank everyone for listening. If you have any comments or suggestions of things you'd like to hear us babble on about, please feel free to contact us at composerish@gmail.com. Until next time, keep on writing.